Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are here for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I am a mixed media artist from Pennsylvania. So I am reusing a canvas, as you can see here, to do a mixed media piece today. And my original intention with this was going to be to do a piece like I had done a couple of videos ago where I do a lot of collage and underpainting and then do some negative painting to reveal a subject. And I thought that subject was going to end up being a hummingbird, but that's not actually what happened. So as I've mentioned before, I am an intuitive artist, which means I kind of just start and do what comes to me in the moment. And that's how this evolved from the hummingbird into what it ends up being. So for right now, I am just repurposing a canvas that I had sitting around for several years that I did not like what I had done with, and I wanted my first layer there to be all in music sheets. So I have some sheets from a hymnal, some sheet music that I got at a used bookstore. I have some gel prints that I have done on the different kinds of music sheets that I have. The whole point was everything was going to be on music sheets because I didn't know exactly how, but some of these were going to make it through that you were going to be able to see on the surface, and I just wanted that there without having to worry about the exact placement of where it was going to be. Now, some of these sheets that I'm using are actually roll-off sheets, and that's kind of a neat trick that I do. When you're doing a gel print and you have a little too much paint on the roller, on the brayer, and you have a roll-off sheet to the side there, well, I will use either hymnal sheets or sheet music sometimes as my roller sheet because it gives you a nice coating of color, but you can still see the musical notes beneath it, and you can use those in collage and they come in really handy. So some of these sheets are actually that as well. So once I have everything on there covered up with my different sheets, I'm adding in some bright colors of paint. These are all acrylic paints, and you are going to be able to see some of the images through the paint because I'm using different methods here. Like, for example, right there I have my color shaper, and while I put some acrylic paint on there, I added some water, and I'm taking the color shaper over top of it to still reveal some of what is underneath there. And I'm going in with the brightest colors that I have. All of my fluorescents and my just intense pigmented colors. That's a fluorescent pink there. I've got some fluorescent greens and oranges. I just wanted this to be as colorful as possible. And I'm also going to get to a point where I want it to be as highly detailed as possible. And I'll explain that to you as we get a little bit further on. I really love this method of using several layers and different kinds of layers to create almost like an underpainting that you then use to reveal an image later on. I did this in a video a couple of weeks ago, which had a bird on it. So this one also was going to have a bird on it, as I'd mentioned, but what I end up doing is two cats, and I'll show you how I get there. Okay, so now that I've got all of that painting done, I'm taking some of my artificial flowers and doing two things. I'm using this little gel plate as a stamp to get some ink onto the flowers, and then I'm also taking the gel plate and pressing it into the canvas there to get the image on there. It's just another way to get more florals on there that are a little bit different from the ones that I already have. So I really like this method. So I'm getting a little bit of paint on there from the flowers, but look here when I lift this up, it just puts a nice impression of that flower there. Again, nothing completely obvious, but a little bit of an idea of a flower, I guess you could say, which is kind of what I'm going for here. I just want this thing to be absolutely full of different kinds of flowers. So that one, I just took the paint and rolled it directly onto the flower, and I'm also using it to stamp some flowers onto the surface there. This is creating multiple layers and different levels of color and value and just different kinds and styles of florals. So it's going to all be flower related, but they're not going to all be identical. And at this point, I'm not really worrying too much about it because while some of this is going to be revealed in the final piece, I don't know exactly where or which ones yet, so that's why I want to make sure I get as much as possible on the surface of the canvas. Then I don't have to maybe make a design choice or a composition choice that I don't want to make, trying to fit my finished subjects of the piece into a part that maybe I don't want. And that might be a little bit confusing right now, but you'll see what I'm talking about here shortly once I get this bottom layer all finished and I have as many flowers on there as I want. I really like using the gel plate as a stamper in and of itself, it creates definitely a different look than what you would use if you are making a gel print, but I love it nonetheless. It's just something that creates a little bit more interest and brings a bit of variety to the piece overall. You're probably looking at this right now and thinking, wow, that is really busy. And it definitely is. And I'm not going to lie, I thought the same thing a couple of times, but that's actually what I'm looking for here, and you'll see why in just a minute. Okay, now that I'm done with that part of the underpainting, I'm going in with my Posca pens, and these are acrylic paint markers. I highly recommend trying these if you haven't already. This is the kind of like the name brand version, but I know Michaels sells a store brand. I haven't tried those yet, keep meaning to, but I'm sure they work basically the same. So these are just markers that are filled with acrylic paint. You can actually use them on the gel plate. You can do intricate drawings and then do a gel print from them, but here I'm just using them to add more fine line and detail and even more color to these flowers that are on my canvas here. So again, not 100% sure where the final piece is going to go on here yet. I just know that I want to get this as saturated with images and colors and lines as I possibly can, so that I will have all of the space to use when I'm trying to decide on placement of my cats that I'm going to be putting on here. It's starting to look really good, and I'm happy with the amount of color and different textures that I've got going on there. But I do decide to end up going back in with a little bit more of the acrylic paint. When I'm putting this orange down with the Posca pen, I had a little bit of flooding, so I used my brush to spread it out to different areas of the painting, and I thought, well, I could actually add a little bit more paint on here too. So I get some of my brighter acrylic colors and go in, and I just start applying the color anywhere that I think needs a little bit of a pop, a little bit of interest brought to it. There's still some dark spots on the canvas that aren't completely filled with something, which is not something I would typically want if I was going for just making a painting. But because this is going to be a negative painting, I do want as much busyness and interest and visual variety underneath as I can possibly have. So I'm just going in and finishing up with a little bit of the paints, and then I'm going to start in with my drawing. I'm using a piece of vine charcoal here, which is just a very soft charcoal. I like to use this for my initial drawing because it's very easy to wipe away, as you can see there. I just have a damp paper towel ready, and if I have something that I don't like the way it looks, I can just wipe that right off and start again. And I do that a few times because when you're freehanding a drawing, sometimes it doesn't go exactly the way you want it the very first time, unless you are just that good, which I am not. And so I like to be able to make my mistakes and then fix them as I go without having to worry about that black smearing or, is it going to affect the color underneath? But this does not, it just wipes right off. So I'm adding the image of just two cats facing the left there. They're slightly different size, slightly different shaped. And here is where I pay attention to composition. I don't like anything just smack dab in the center, so it's a slightly off-centered composition. There's more visual weight on the right-hand side, and that creates a much more visually interesting composition than just having one component right in the center of the canvas. That's very obvious and very boring to look at, and it's a little more interesting if you make it just slightly different than that. Just something to keep in mind in the future. So once I've got my shapes refined as much as I want them, I had to get that top cat to stop looking like a unicorn and the bottom cat to stop looking like a fox. So I went in with a charcoal pencil actually to define my details there, and then I'm going back over it with the vine charcoal to make sure that I like it. And now I've got a piece of my very dark black charcoal that I'm outlining everything with once I have the shapes that I'm happy with there, so that it really stands out against all of the print underneath. So you can start to see how this is going to come together there. I've got the composition down, I've got the images down, and now I'm going to start my negative painting. So for this, I chose several different colors. I've got some titanium white, some azo gold, excuse me, a little bit of, I believe that is called light lavender, and pale pink. I'm mixing all of those with the titanium white because I want a very, very light color in all of those. That azo gold mixed with the white creates just the prettiest cream color. So if you're ever looking for a good cream, I highly recommend that. It's not too yellow and it has a nice warm shine to it almost. Now all I'm doing is taking my flat brush there and going right up against the charcoal lines to create a negative painting. And that's what that means. I am not painting the object, I'm painting around it to reveal the object. And this is why I wanted those background colors and textures and shapes to be so saturated, because the background that I'm painting in is going to be rather plain. It's got some different colors in there, so it's going to have tonal variations, but it's not going to have any of that busyness in the background. Those flowers are all going to be concealed so that the only ones that you can actually see are within the perimeter of the drawing of the cats. I love this style of painting. It's something I just started doing not that long ago, but I really like it and I can see a lot of different possibilities and different opportunities with it. I actually had another idea as I was doing this one today for something that I will either be doing in the next video or possibly the one after. I had an idea for next week's, but we'll see what actually happens. But you will be seeing this in the future if you stick with me here. But yeah, I'm just going around and outlining these cats, and this is another point at which you can refine the shape a little bit. If you don't like the way something turned out with that charcoal, you can just paint over it. Now the charcoal will bleed into the paint a little bit, it'll mix with it, so just, you know, be careful. I wouldn't drag a whole bunch of it into the paint, but even if it does, let it dry and you can paint over it. It's not that big of a deal. So what I like to do here with the background is not completely paint the whole entire thing. You'll see I'm purposely leaving patches of the underneath visible. Now you might not be able to tell exactly what they are in most of the places, and that's okay. I'm not really looking for identifiable shapes in the background. I'm just looking for little pops of color or just a little bit of some kind of hint of something back there that you might not be able to know exactly what it is, but it just makes for an overall interesting look to the piece. It's kind of hard to tell from the video here, but I am going back and forth between the cream, the pale pink, and the pale lavender, so it's creating just enough difference to not make it just be a plain white background. There are different tones in there. I could have even pushed it a little bit further if I wanted to, add a little bit of Payne's gray to make a little bit darker tones, but I'm very happy with the way it's turning out here and with the background colors that I chose. Now you could go even further with this and choose to do more design work inside the image of the cat and take micron pens or even do further collaging or painting or anything you wanted to do. Really, the sky is the limit. And that's another cool thing about this method. You can, if you do not have gel prints and do not want to do that kind of piece, you can use magazine images that you cut out. You can use, you know, whatever you have, newspapers, book pages, anything. And if you don't feel confident in drawing the shape, just trace something and make yourself a stencil. It's so easy to do and has so many possibilities. So here I'm just taking a little bit of that dark charcoal and going around the edge, smoothing it. It creates almost like its own little bit of shadow, and it kind of brings together the outline of the cats here with the outline of the actual piece itself. And I absolutely love the way that looks together. And after that, I decide if I'm happy with the piece, and I go ahead and sign my name, and we're ready to roll. And here's the finished piece. I call it the Two Watchmen, and this will be available for sale on my Etsy shop, along with many other things if you want to take a minute and check that out. Thank you again for everybody who has stopped by. I appreciate all of you. If you haven't had a chance yet, subscribe to my channel and give me a thumbs up. And if you're looking for a further way to support my channel, look in the description of this video and you will find a link to buy me a coffee. There is more information about that available in the link. Thank you all so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a great week. Talk to you again soon.